Так, там це мікрофон, ви по черзі один одному будете передавати ще одному залі для питань.
Я перший. Щас.
Водичку можете одразу собі відкривати. В разі потреби позаду є перекладач. Вушка.
Тобто можна. А як слухати його? Ухо. Такого живого перекладача не буде. Чи буде?
Це 30-та.
It's June 30, Ukrainian Media Center Ukrinform starts its operation today. My name is Vasil Samokhvalov. Now we will be talking about the guide for the veterans and their family members for psychological and psychiatric aid in Ukraine. What is behind these words? We will be talking with Oleksandr Chamorsov, veteran, United Veterans Fund Crisis Hotline Counselor, Svitlana Kashenets, Deputy Minister for Veteran Affairs, Natalia Kalmikova, Executive Director of the Ukrainian Veterans Foundation, Olena Lashko, PhD in Psychology, Ukrainian Veterans Fund Crisis Hotline Manager, and Yulia Mazur, the Analyst of Coordination Center at the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine. Before we proceed to our conversation, to our discussion, please have a look at this brief video. He was my only son, the only sense of my life. I can't get in touch with him for a fourth day. It's hell out there in the front line. I'm just closing my eyes and I'm back in that terrible environment. Please call hotline of Ukrainian Veterans Fund support. Don't stay in the darkness, talk to a therapist. So let's start with Mr. Oleksandr. Mr. Oleksandr, if there is a guide, it means that there is a problem, because the guide is the response to this problem. So what problem is there? Good afternoon, my name is Oleksandr. I'm a crisis psychologist, I'm a therapist, trauma therapist, crisis counselor at the hotline of Ukrainian Veterans Foundation, and what's most interesting, I am a veteran myself. In fact, I was in the battles, I was taking part in this war since 2014 until the beginning of 2016, and as I got back from the war, I had no guide. There was no even Ministry for Veterans Affairs back then. If someone may remind me when the Ministry for Veterans Affairs was created, I would appreciate it a lot. In the year 2018, yeah, right. So my coming back home, it was difficult enough. It was my problem and my task I had to solve. I coped with that task, but what's interesting, I never addressed the government for any support. Well, I tried, but I was not able to find any such support. I was helped by different civil organizations. I was helped by my now colleagues, and I made it. Well, it seems like I made it in major part. And I wouldn't like my story to be repeated by those who come back from the front lines now. This is how we've come up with the idea of the guide. I didn't know Was my answer comprehensive enough? Yes, I think it's comprehensive enough. Can you please give the floor to Miss Svitlana? Miss Svitlana, we understand that rehabilitation, any kind of rehabilitation, including psychological rehabilitation, is one of the challenges for the government, and the government will build the roadmap to find those people, to identify those people, to provide them with support, to categorize them, set priorities, and so on and so forth. Can you please tell us about those challenges in detail and the role of the hotline that is operating now? Good morning. Good morning, everybody. When Natalia Kalmikova called me yesterday, the head of the Ukrainian Veterans Fund, how we started our activity during the full-scale invasion. It coincided so that the activity of the foundation started during this period very difficult for the country, and the first decisions were what projects we can implement shortly. The project of support of those who need support. Well, first project was the mini grants for the private entrepreneurs, and another project that we started formulating starting from spring, and we found the partners promptly, those who supported us, IREX and State Department of the United States. Those are our reliable partners who support us all the time. They supported this idea, and in June we started the operation of the crisis hotlines. Some government officials surprised me. They were saying this project is irrelevant, we have enough information, why do we need this crisis hotline anyway? But regardless, the hotline is operating for 1 year, and the specialists are in touch for those who need their support. We're proud of this project because we understand what are the matters that people try to address using the hotline. We understand their condition, and at the same time we understand how important it is for them to be able to get in touch with their friends 24/7, to get in touch with those who understand them. And we've realized that there is a lot of matters related to bureaucratic processes, and this is how we came up with the idea of another service, the free legal advice. They lift a lot of issues that need detailization. And I think that they help people in crisis to cope with difficult situations. In a year, we decided to expand our hotline, and today the collective of Ukrainian Veterans Fund, in coordination with the Ministry for Veterans Affairs, works with other partners to expand our hotline so it covers a wider range of issues, so that the veterans and their family members could call one single number and get all the information necessary, everything related to their problems, everything related to the challenges they're facing, so that they can get support and help. First of all, we work on the register of providers of psychological support services. We've been reinforced by two very important partners, important institutions, the Ministry for Veterans Affairs, and I want to introduce also Victoria Solovyova, who is the head of Coordination Center for Mental Health under the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine. Victoria is the one who, together with the experts from another institution, helps us in creating standards for psychological support. And yet that's yet another important step where we will work with civil and international organizations together with the local and central authorities. The psychological health, the mental health, the psychological condition of people, it's a matter that was not so popular a year or more ago, and it did not nourish the culture of addressing the therapists, the specialists. But thanks to the First Lady, to Olena Zelenska, we know that now there is a very powerful program in place. How are you doing? And that's an important question we may ask our colleagues, our friends, our family members, to understand what condition the people are in. Do they need help? Do they need support? If so, we should know what is the way we should go so that those people get the high quality expert support. this guide will help the people who work with the veterans, both male and female. It will help people who work in the bodies of local governments. This guide will help the collectives of those organizations in the trainings for HRs, for the collectives, how to communicate with the people who come back from the front lines. This is why I want to thank the whole team of Ukrainian Veterans Fund. I want to thank the team of the Crisis Hotline for the great job they were doing within this year. Thank you very much. Please give the floor to Miss Natalia. Miss Natalia, can you please give us a little bit more detail, maybe some figures about the work, about the operation of the hotline, about the guide, what will be the print, which number of copies are you prepared to issue, and how it will be disseminated, who is the recipient, who is supposed to receive it, who is supposed to have it on their desks. Thank you for the question. I'm happy that we are able to talk here today about what was the team of Ukrainian Veterans Fund doing all this time. We have feedback from the users, from the clients who addressed for the hotline for support. And you know, one of the cases when a person, well, when we helped a person to avoid a suicide, and even one such situation is something that corroborates the necessity of existence of the hotline. There is a number of other projects, and they will never be enough, because the number of people, the number of veterans, their family members, and even among the civilians, there is a colossal number of people who need support. Why is it crisis support? Because when we were deploying it, and even now, when people end up in difficult situations, when they end up under stress alone, they need a place, some spot where they exactly can get help, where they can make a call and shout out loud. The psychologist can verify it. Sometimes it happens, so they can just express their emotions, and they will give me the tools using which I can cope with my condition. About the figures, they are impressive. We've processed more than 13,000 calls, and there are numbers that I want to make known, I want people to talk about, is the correlation of the calls between males and females. Obviously, there is such a stereotype that women mostly address for psychological help, but the men, they are strong, they don't go to the therapist, and our figures tell us that almost 60% of the calls were received from the men, and this is an expiring number. It says that our defenders, they understand that the support is necessary, and they understand that they should address someone for such support, and this is the way they solve their problems, rather than using other methods such as alcohol or drugs. What's almost illustrative is the age. 49% of the calls are the calls from the people aged 45-60. We understand that those are mature people, the people who really want to act adequate, the people who realize that in the society or in the unity, if they call us from the front lines, they need to be in good condition for those around them. The most widespread are the calls from the family members of the veterans about anxiety when a relative is in the front lines and they cannot get in touch with him. That's clear. Everybody who is waiting, parents, wives, children, they face this problem, and I want to emphasize that you will be helped by the specialists of the crisis hotline. Please call. The number is posted online and in the platform How Are You, in the platform Baza, in all our social media pages. Just Google it, keep this phone number, and you will be able to call there. I can tell when you feel melted. That's a non-scientific word, but this is something that expresses your condition. Well, I want to thank Miss Svitlana. Among the requests, we come across those that are not of a psychological nature, but they're just requests when people cannot find some documents, when they cannot process those documents, and they end up under stress. So expansion, well, and the emergence of these legal consultations with the Ukrainian Veterans Fund, with the support of other organizations, we will reinforce that section 2. So I think that we will be talking now about the guide. What will be the number of copies issued? Well, there is a small number of copies issued now, and up to 100, but we will issue more. Moreover, it's available online. You can download it. We will disseminate it around the local administrations, community administrations, all the government institutions who one way or another work with the people, because now we have a country of defenders, a country of veterans. So ideally every person should read it and understand the basic elements, how to help themselves and how to help the people around them. So can you please give the floor to Miss Olena? What are the questions covered in this guide? What are the advice expressed there? I would thank you. I would like to support Miss Natalia. When we put together the guide, we were talking mostly to the veterans and the members of their families, but we understand that in reality there is information in there, such an excursion into the topic of attitude to veterans, and both male and female, and we understand that it's not going to be like back in the year 2014, because now the veteran community will be prevalent in the country, and it's not them who will integrate into our society, but it's us who will integrate into their senses. And it's good because such events as the war, they transform the senses into such as those pushing you to educate your best qualities, your best features. We will aspire to realization of the fact that we are part of such society. So in fact this guide will be of use to any person, regardless of their age, gender, profession, and so on and so forth. What are their interests, just to better understand the new Ukrainian society. When we were found in the hotline, the first task we were facing, apart from the administrative tasks such as organization of training courses for the psychologists, the first task was to get a team of skilled professionals who would treat a veteran not as a broken person without that stigma, but as to a person with a new experience, filled with a new experience, who got the best capabilities actualized. And this is the team that we gathered at our hotline now, and this is why humanity is our first creed, and this is why we expressed all these ideas in our guide. So I urge everybody to get familiarized. Thank you very much. Can you please give the floor to Miss Yulia? I have the question, well, I have a generalized question. If one feels melted, so on the level of the government, do we have understanding of number of people who will need such support? And as Miss Olena just mentioned, that the veteran community will be prevalent it means that society is going to be melted. So in facts and figures and tendencies, can you describe what's going on in Ukraine now? Well, you know, starting from the last year, we founded the all-Ukrainian program of mental health support upon the initiative of the First Lady, and it has become a push for understanding at the level of the government of the importance of the psychological support health and understanding of mental health topic as a separate sphere which requires both government support and understanding of importance of this in relation to every specific person. Every person is supposed to understand that mental health is the integral part of the overall health, and we're talking about our well-being that we all aspire to. And this is what the all-Ukrainian program is aimed at. It gives us the opportunity to focus certain resources, first of all communication resources, for a broad communication campaign that Ms. Svitlana has just mentioned, the communication campaign, How Are You Doing, that was in fact launched in March this year. And right now we're seeing some positive changes, because if we review a veteran from 2015, back then they only started implementation the program of psychological rehabilitation. Everybody was saying it was not fulfilled because veterans could not be invited for the rehabilitation. There was a huge stigma. There was an scare. People were scared to address for psychological help, and we were asking the Department of Information Policy to make explanations, to communicate it, that the therapist is no psychiatrist, it will have no consequences for your further employment or your further military service, but still that process was very complicated both for the veterans and for those who took part in the implementation of the government policy. Now we have the examples within the last year. Obviously the crisis related to COVID-19 all over the world influenced it a lot, and it became a push for the development of telemedicine, telepsychology, remote support services, and it became of help to expand the scope, the range of services for all categories of our citizens. And starting from the last year, there is a number of volunteer initiatives existing, like chatbots, Telegram channels, the therapist groups, the platforms, the charity platforms where the therapists got united to provide their support to the people affected. Some of them specialize on veterans and members of their families, and obviously the initiative of the Ministry for Veterans Affairs and the Ukrainian Veterans Fund to create the crisis hotline. It was very timely and urgent, and it was supposed to provide the first contact point with the ministry to solve the most painful issues. It's clear that any crisis hotline receives more addresses of social nature. This is why we're talking about the mental health in a broader context. There is a statistics that 80% of all the issues may be lifted on the level of psychosocial support without addressing the higher level specialists. And it's true. And I think that the work in this area is obviously supposed to be continuing, and this guide is supposed to become a first component of the big work to create the network of providers of such services for the veterans, the providers of psychological, social, and legal support. And it should have a complex approach, and it should be comprehensive, so as every single person is reached out to. It should be available, and the services should be existing on the level of the communities, and it's more about the building of the social services, about the teamwork with the family members, the first link medical specialists who currently undergo training in widespread mental health problems, and there is the package implemented by the National Health Service of Ukraine, and the family doctors, they become this first contact point, the entry point to the system, but the family members should link their client to someone else and not mandatory within the healthcare system. It could be some services on the level of the communities. So we see some positive changes here, but we still have a lot of work to be done. And regarding the guide, I would like to add that yes, there is a part of it that can be called the ABC of self-support for the veterans. There are certain exercises that we recommend, for example, including in the barrier-free guide, the psychological first help guide, and recommended interventions recommended by the World Health Organization. And we, by the way, have to work in this area too. So we have to continue this work to create the network and to give a veteran some specific routes where they should address, whom they should address with their problem. If there is no such offline point of contact, it should be existing online, and obviously continue moving in that direction. About the figures, may I ask you what is the number of people in Ukraine who will need such type of support shortly? Well, the number of Ukrainians given by the WHO usually it's 22% of population who will need such support in crisis situations. It doesn't necessarily mean that everybody will have some mental health problems, but some issues related to mental health, yeah, people will have it. In view of our situation, I don't want to make it seem worse, so we will be basing on those figures, but we audited the needs, the resources. The study was done last year, and this winter we were studying what we have in the systems of certain ministries, and we were saying that actually the number of people who have some issues amounts to 10 million, but the rest of the population, if they are not provided with relevant psychosocial support, they may, so to say, leak into that category. So I'm having a question: if there is one in 5 persons who need such support, yeah, it's 22%. So our system, to what extent will it be ready to process this number of people? Because we understand if it's not ready, people will be resorting to some other things like alcohol and drugs, some charlatans, some YouTube therapies and stuff like that. To what extent is the system ready, and what should be changed so we are ready on the level of the country, so we can process this huge problem? Well, let me start, and I think my colleagues will be able to continue. I will tell you about the activity of the Coordination Center at the Cabinet of Ministers. It was created during the last days of March, and its task is to join forces of the central government and of the regional governments to coordinate the activities of state and non-state sector, to build the network and to unite their forces to create the system of mental health support, something we had not before. We had understanding of medical support, but we realized that this phenomena is of a broader nature, and all the ministries, maybe you've heard about it, they presented their priority projects in this area, and they all aim at development of something that was identified upon the results of the audit of the resources, something that may be of their point of growth. And the Minister of Social Policy, for example, works now on creating the network of the centers of resilience in the communities. The Ministry of Internal Affairs works on the algorithm of emergency crisis reaction in crisis situations, with engagement of not only state emergency service, psychological support service, but also we should understand whom to link the person to after a crisis situation. Is it a social sphere or is it a healthcare facility? And this work is underway with the key stakeholders, with all the ministries, upon the adoption of the resolution on psychological support of the population. The work in the regions has begun to create such centers that are supposed to coordinate all such activities, including from the point of view of psychological support, mental health support for the population. So we've started that movement in that direction, and I think that the Ministry for Veterans Affairs, which also implements their own priority project, will be working on that quite actively. Do you have anything to add? Oh, of course I have something to add. I'm an adept of the principle of personal responsibility, because we understand that before the beginning of the full-scale invasion there was an n number of terrorists. Those who were working with those needs that were formulated, that were developing. So yeah, that is exactly what the question is about. So this dramatic growth of the demand cannot cover it with the number of therapists that existed before. So how many years people have to train to become a therapist, mental health therapist? What are the phases they are supposed to fulfill? Like, for example, training, the practice in medical education, and it's a lengthy process. It's a challenge not only for the government but also for the civil organizations and so on and so forth. So I'm an adept of the principle of the personal responsibility. I'm talking as Natalia Kalmikova and not as the director of the foundation, that every person are supposed to know what are they doing when they don't feel all right, and there is an immense number of resources where you can get some tips you can learn from, and you can start supporting yourself. It's our responsibility in front of ourselves, in front of the people we work with, in front of Ukraine in general. It's convenient to say that the government is supposed to do something, but there are things that when the state and me are one and the same. So this guide, the non-barrier guide, are all those things that are not kept in the ministries for internal use and creation of the network of centers. This is why they are commonly available, so that every person, every conscious person who understands that I am Ukraine, and depending on my attitude to the veteran, depending on my attitude to my colleagues, this country develops in certain way. So please read, find the tools that are effective to you. Yes, the government, they are doing their part, they will catch up, but what's important, that the state mechanism is one thing and the personal responsibility is yet another thing. I would like to hear something from your colleagues from the Ministry of Healthcare, so please take them with you next time you come here. Well, I would like to say that every year about 32,000 psychologists are graduating from the medical universities. Well, not only medical universities but also sociological, pedagogical, but we don't know to what extent they are skilled specialists, what are the standards in compliance with which they should be working, and who coordinates the work of the psychologists, and to what extent people can be confident that they've come to the right crisis therapist. So this is the question that we're asking ourselves, and I think that we should work on it together in coordination with the communities, with our colleagues, so we understand that our veteran, whether male or female, a member of their family who end up under stress, that they receive high quality support, and God forbid them to address somebody who has some bad condition. Well, yeah, there is a number of cases in the society when people called themselves therapists and they ended up not quite well. I'm from Donetsk region myself, and I was facing this situation by myself when the civil organizations were taking therapists. They were providing some information from some information resources, and there was a number of cases that we experienced. We even were addressing journalists, the families, so they sort out what was the way that psychological support was provided, because since 2014 there is a lot of projects emerging for mental health support, and specifically there in Donetsk and Luhansk regions where the war was starting. And having analyzed all possible resources, we've realized that there are three components. Our veteran or member of their family, they should be receiving a service which is available. We have to understand the quality of this service. So now we're working a number of ways that we are about to unite in one system. So first of all is the online support, the emergency support. This is why we've gathered here today to talk about our crisis hotline. We're talking about information resources such as e-veteran, where all the necessary information is gathered, and we have to take it responsibly, and we have to only advise some high-skilled professional therapists. We're talking about the support of the business collectives, companies collectives. We're talking about HRs here. Psychological support centers work with such collectives, and we are also talking about the physical contact, the creation of the Institute for Veterans Advisors, where people are in the communities, they can inform, they can coordinate, they may help people understand practically what is the support necessary, and they can accompany them on that way. Thank you very much. Well, I have to agree with the principle of the personal responsibility, and I'm happy this guide contains the phone number of our crisis hotline. It means that whoever calls this number will contact me or my colleagues. And I don't really like to talk about those present in third persons. I want my colleagues to raise their hands at least. I really appreciate your input. I really appreciate that you are here for me, that I work together with you on this project. I want to thank Olena, our director, for gathering a team like that. So this is where my personal responsibility is satisfied. This part of the services will be at the highest level, and it is on the highest level. Well, it coincided so that a couple of days ago it was 1 year since we received the first call. Yeah, it's been a year, right? And 1 year is a very powerful experience. My colleagues together with me, they are in the forward age of the crisis psychology, because telephone advice without seeing whom you're talking to is the highest skill. It's really the highest skill. I'm saying so because I have the experience of counseling. I work with other projects, and I understand what I'm talking about. I know that after the year of work, they are the specialists who are very difficult to replace with someone else. I love all of you. I'm hugging all of you. Thank you. So, online psychological support. So before we proceed to Q&A sessions, I want to ask you, can we systematize the main challenges that we're facing? We've heard about the capabilities, about the numbers, we've heard about the stigmatization, we've heard that the work with the families is important, because sometimes this route of support can go through the family members, through wives, because the man may be afraid to address the therapist. But the challenges can be listed like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll tell you about one of the things in brief. One of the challenges that I'm observing is that the veterans, they know that they need help, and the civilians do not. But at the same time, the veterans are being stigmatized, that they have PTSD. And I want to remind you that not every veteran has a PTSD, and not every person with PTSD is a veteran. So we have to break this toxic connection in our heads. And again, getting back to the civilians, everyone who ended up under shelling, those who were staying in Ukraine, every single one needs help. I'm a little bit more dramatic than Miss Yulia. I think that everyone needs help. Well, if you allow me, I will add a little bit. I was talking about it in the broadcast of Kiev Youth Center yesterday. Like I personally, like Olena Lashko, as Miss Natalia puts it, I'm seeing the situation in this way. It's not the veterans who are about to integrate into civil life, but us, Ukrainians who survived different experiences. We have to take our suitcases and to move into the new space of Ukrainian society. And it's not about civilians accepting veterans, but it's about all of us together realizing and reevaluating our values and move together in one space. And we are supposed to be consolidated. The government should listen to that experience that exists among the specialists now, and the specialists are supposed to be open to work with the government, and the veterans should open themselves to the veterans, not like opening their souls, but they should be ready to some constructive cooperation. Both civilians and those coming back from abroad, we've all survived very different experiences, but what unites us is the common values, and it's about our future. And for the sake of our future, for the sake of our kids, and I hope that we will be able to live in this future as well. Well, I would like to continue with the fact that the society has high demands now. We are not about receiving the veterans, but we will be living side by side. We need a society which is sensitive to the mental health issues of everybody, and we have very positive changes in this regard. We have a demand from the big businesses who want to adapt to those conditions. They want to remove the barriers which may arise when the veterans come back to their jobs. On one hand, there is a good topic such as psychosocial support in the workplaces for everybody. This topic is developing in Ukraine right now, and also we have the representatives of the big business who are part of the Business Without Barriers community, and they express their intention to study the specifics of the work with the veterans who are coming back. So in the coordination center, we gathered all the stakeholders in this area who work in this area, who know the veteran, who are familiar with the veteran community, including Ukrainian Veterans Fund. And on the other hand, the businesses that are part of this community, and we try to join our forces, and we're planning to prepare a specific section related to veterans topics, the barrier-free guide for the veterans. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions on the floor? If we do, please raise your hand. Good afternoon, Yulia Gadina, Ukrinform. I'm having a question to Miss Natalia. Everybody who were talking today focused their attention on the psychological support of those who call to the crisis hotline. But what are the other matters they try to solve out? What are they concerned apart from the psychological support? So psychological support, 34% information request, 24% legal advice, 6.6%. Requests related to the difficulties with adaptation, 13%, permanent stress and panic attacks, 6%, humanitarian aid and social payments 8%, difficulties with medical rehabilitation and psychological rehabilitations resulting in stress 6.6%. Among the family members, 52% information requests, stress and anxiety 36%, legal advice 13%. So basically, you know, it's a complex, it's an ecosystem that people live in. For example, if my physical health is not okay, my mental health is not going to be okay, and the other way around. If I don't know, I'm tired of running around for paperwork. I hate it myself. And I'm saying, may we establish the Institute of a Civilian Advisor, because this stress we undergo during all the bureaucratic procedures, it results in something when people cannot solve their functional, their material issues, and it overlaps with the psychological effect. It's a complex story. The percentage may vary week to week. For example, in case of a massive shelling or massive airstrike, the number of requests for crisis support grows immediately, but when a couple of days or weeks the situation is more calm, people get more concerns because they have to go to some institutions. Those institutions have some bureaucratic procedures, people are stressed by that, and they call us. So I think that all the figures will be presented in our press release, and you will be able to use them for communication. I also want to add that the ministry with the foundation analyze on a weekly basis the figures, the requests, and the nature of those requests. They are analyzed also by the legal advisors, and we create information materials that can be used by the people who maybe don't want to address for support, but they have this opportunity to read, and they may find the solutions, the answers there without addressing therapists. So it's important to understand where such useful information may be found. On the Facebook page, on the website of Ukrainian Veterans Fund, there the lawyers also analyze the issues, the problems, and they answer the most widespread questions the people ask while calling to the crisis hotline. This is an important component using which we expand the range of services provided by the veteran hotline. Do we have any more questions? Well, if we have no more questions, let's wrap up. Thank you very much for coming and talking about the mental health of our veterans, people, society, about the prospects and the guide which will help us to achieve our goals, and we will continue our work shortly. See you. He was my only son, my only sense of my life. I cannot get in touch with him for 4 days. It's hell out there in the forward dash. As I close my eyes, I'm going back to those terrible events. I'm scared to fall asleep. Call the crisis hotline of Ukrainian Veterans Fund. Don't stay in the darkness. Talk to a therapist.